The most powerful fleet in the Japanese Navy is on the attack. Their massive guns primed to crush the Allied advance. The only force standing in the way of a devastating enemy victory is a handful of tiny U.S. ships and planes. It's a courageous group of American tin cans facing off against a giant Japanese armada led by the legendary Yamato, the largest battleship in history. Through state-of-the-art computer animation, experience heroic stories of the sailors and aviators who faced the enemy onslaught and ensured the death of the Japanese Navy. October 24, 1944. Fighters and bombers from aircraft carriers of the American Third Fleet are flying a vital mission. Search out and destroy the Japanese Center Force, the Imperial Navy's most powerful fleet. Center Force must be stopped. The massive armada threatens to pulverize Allied ground forces now assaulting the Philippines. 23-year-old Helldiver pilot Lieutenant Nick Fellner spots his prey. He can hardly believe his eyes.
Only when I came through the clouds did I see all of these Japanese ships racing in corkscrew patterns on the water below. So I picked out the largest ship I could find and homed in on that ship. It was the largest target I'd ever seen.
Fellner's target is, in fact, the largest, most heavily armed battleship ever put to sea, Japan's flagship Yamato. The 72,000-ton behemoth wields the most powerful naval guns in history. Her 18-inch main battery can hurl 3,000-pound shells over 25 miles.
The Yamato was launched with the intention of destroying any enemy battleship at a standoff range, which is to say the 18-inch guns of the Yamato were meant to destroy the U.S. fleet before the U.S. fleet could ever get off a shot.
Yamato, her sister ship Musashi, and the rest of the 27-ship center force steamed relentlessly toward the Allied ground forces. Fellner must act now.
We moved into an attack formation. It was principle for dive bombing to attack out of the sun. This gave us the best chance of coming in without the gunners on the deck being able to shoot up at us.
Yamato unleashes her 150 anti-aircraft guns. Fellner dives into the eye of the deadly storm. His Helldiver carries a single 1,000-pound armor-piercing bomb. Fellner must aim his plane directly at his target, dive in as close as possible, and fly rock steady in the face of lethal enemy fire. Plunging nearly 10,000 feet in a near-vertical, screaming power dive.
The important factor is to make sure that we're on target. Somewhere below 1,000 feet, I realized I had no more time, and I pressed the button on the bomb release.
At the last second, he yanks back on the stick, pulling out in a crushing 9G climb. He looks back at his target.
My hit had turned out to be an extremely lucky hit because it hit one of the very few unarmed sections of this battleship.
Fellner's bomb punches through the deck and detonates deep inside the ship.
When it exploded below the water level, it caused two huge holes to open in the hull of the ship. 3,000 metric tons of water flooded into the ship.
Yamato lists 5 degrees, but her hull is built with a honeycomb of 1,150 watertight compartments. Damage control teams quickly right the ship. But in the aerial assault, 3 of the other Japanese ships are severely damaged. And Yamato's sister ship, Musashi, is sent to the bottom of the Sibuyan Sea. Of the 259 aircraft in the assault, 18 are shot down. Center Force Commander Admiral Takeo Kurita orders his ships to turn around. What appears to be another victory for the American naval force is, in reality, just round 1 in one of the greatest sea battles in history. It's late in the war. Japan desperately needs to halt the Allies' unstoppable advance. General Douglas MacArthur has landed a 200,000-man invasion force on the Philippine island of Leyte. The invasion threatens to sever critical supply lines. It's a battle the Japanese can't afford to lose.
If the Japanese lose the Philippines, there are lines of supply between Japan and the Dutch East Indies will be severed. They will no longer be able to function as a wartime economy. So if Japan loses the Philippines, the war is over.
Japan has virtually no carrier-based aircraft left. Their last hope lies with their giant battleships. They devise a bold strategy called the Shogo, or Victory Plan. The objective? Crush MacArthur's invasion force with the battleship's big guns. Shogo divides the Japanese Navy into 3 forces. The center force, led by Admiral Kurita, will steam towards Leyte through the San Bernardino Strait. A southern force will steam north toward MacArthur's troops from the Surigao Strait.
The plan is to get these forces through these heavily guarded waterways and to approach Leyte as in a pincher movement from the north and from the south.
The key to the plan is deception. A northern force, comprised of what remains of the depleted carrier fleet, will act as a decoy, hopefully luring away American Admiral Bull Halsey's powerful Third Fleet, leaving the waterway to Leyte wide open for the center force. Now, in the aftermath of a successful air attack on the center force, Halsey takes the bait. He believes Kurita is retreating, so he moves north to pursue the Japanese carriers. Then, just 2 hours after turning away, Admiral Kurita orders the Yamato and his other remaining ships to reverse course and steam back towards Leyte. In the early morning of October 25th, they emerge off the coast of the Philippine island of Samar. At 6:35 a.m., they spot ship masts on the horizon. Range 25 miles. The Japanese lookouts lack detailed spotting silhouettes. They assume the ships ahead are part of Halsey's Third Fleet. They couldn't be more wrong. It's a small task unit of the American 7th Fleet called Taffy 3, a handful of small ships only there to support ground troops and scout for submarines.
Taffy 3, the small detachment of worker bees, which has no business being in the same ocean as the Great Yamato. The last thing they ever expected, this small task unit, was to be thrown into action against a main Japanese battle force, but that's exactly what happens in the battle off Samar.
Taffy 3 is made up of 13 ships, 6 small escort aircraft carriers, 3 destroyers, and 4 destroyer escorts. The American ships are armed with 5-inch guns. The center force boasts 23 warships, 4 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 11 destroyers. Yamato alone packs 9 18.1-inch guns and weighs as much as all the Taffy 3 ships combined. On board the ships of Taffy 3, the crews are relaxed and confident. They think the center force is long gone.
All of a sudden, appearing on the radar screen was this blob bigger than a silver dollar. I said, "Oh my God." I was speechless, so I just turned, ran up to the bridge, and the captain was there, and I stood there and listened to him orate. All hands to general quarters were being attacked.
At 6:59 a.m., the 18-inch guns of Yamato open up on Taffy 3. The stage is set for one of the greatest mismatches in naval history. A virtual David versus Goliath on the high seas. October 25th, 1944. One of the most epic sea battles of World War II is underway. The Japanese center force has opened fire on Taffy 3, a group of tiny American ships. Sheets of flame explode from Yamato's massive guns. Kurita's ships are here. Taffy 3 is here, 20 miles to the southeast. They are the only ships protecting this approach to the 200,000 American soldiers on the beaches of Leyte here. Japanese Admiral Takeo Kurita thinks he's attacking Admiral Halsey's 3rd Fleet and rushes his ships into action. The 23-ship center force is in standard cruising formation, a series of short parallel columns. Normally, when an enemy is spotted, the ships maneuver into a single-line battle column, bringing the full broadside and all their guns to bear on the enemy. But Kurita's eager to strike quickly against Halsey. Instead of forming a powerful battle column, he rashly orders a general attack. His forces remain divided, a tactical error in the battle to come. Taffy 3 commander, Rear Admiral Clifton Ziggy Sprague, knows he's outnumbered and outgunned, and reacts quickly. Sprague's 6 small escort carriers are positioned inside a defensive circle of 3 destroyers and 4 destroyer escorts. His first priority is to get his carriers out of harm's way. He orders them to turn east, away from the attacking Japanese fleet. At the same time, he scrambles all of his aircraft to the attack. Over 150 Wildcats and Avengers quickly launch. The destroyers and destroyer escorts lay a protective smokescreen. They use chemical smoke canisters and add fuel oil directly into their smokestacks. While masking the carrier's retreat, the maneuver exposes the destroyer force.
We were in a position where we could shield our group from the big bad wolves. And when we were going back and forth making this initial smoke screen, they tended to shoot a little bit more at us. And we started getting pretty nervous about it, all the splashes around us.
The ship closest to the advancing Japanese force is the destroyer USS Johnston. Her captain, Commander Ernest Evans, is not about to let the enemy overwhelm them without a fight. Not waiting for orders, he goes on the offensive. In what seems like a suicide mission, he orders flank speed, full left rudder. Johnston breaks defensive formation and steams directly towards the enemy fleet.
I'd talked to the captain, and the only thing I mentioned to him, please don't let us go down with our torpedoes aboard. I'd been in the Battle of Guadalcanal 2 years earlier, and that was on a destroyer, and we didn't fire any of our torpedoes. So I wanted to get those fired. He said, well, let's go ahead and make our torpedo attack.
To get within range for an effective torpedo strike, Evans must close to within 5.5 miles. But the Japanese naval guns can strike at 3 to 4 times that distance. A single round from Yamato could kill everyone aboard Johnston. The Japanese blast away, well beyond the range of any counterfire. Johnston plows ahead fearlessly, zigzagging through the gauntlet of enemy salvos. Evans orders his crew to chase splashes. In this defensive tactic, the ship sets a course for the plume of water caused by an impacting enemy shell, gambling that the enemy gunners won't shoot in the same place twice.
You head directly for it in the hope that he'll change his the settings on his either elevation or his training of the gun for the next shot.
Johnston closes on enemy cruisers. Range 10 miles. Striking distance for her 5-inch guns. At 7:10 a.m., Johnston opens fire on the lead heavy cruiser Kumano.
I don't think we can force through the armor siding of a cruiser, but we could rough them up a little bit and knock off some of their smaller gun crews and things like that.
In 5 furious minutes, Johnston's main battery unleashes over 200 rounds. .54-pound shells explode on Kumano's bridge. Johnston races towards the giant enemy ship. Her torpedoes are ready. The Johnston is a Fletcher-class destroyer, designed for scouting and screening against enemy destroyers and submarines. Weighing just 2,100 tons, destroyers like the Johnston are nicknamed tin cans for their lack of armor. Kumano is over 6 times the size of the Johnston, over 2 football fields in length, and heavily armored from bow to stern. Johnston is slightly faster than Kumano, but Kumano's armament dwarfs Johnston's. The American ship's only hope is to skillfully target its 10 high-explosive Mark 15 torpedoes housed in the 2 launchers on her deck. The Johnston presses forward to within torpedo range. Amazingly, the shocked enemy gunners fail to score a single hit. Johnston's torpedo men take aim. They must lead the target, estimating the speed of the enemy ship and the time it will take for the torpedoes to reach their mark. On Captain Evans' order, sharp blasts of compressed air hurl the torpedoes into the water. Each one packs a powerful wallop, 825 pounds of high explosives. After firing, the Johnston maneuvers sharply away. At a depth of 6 feet, her torpedoes swim toward their target at 27 knots. Then, a powerful explosion. The Kumano is hit hard.
The Kumano has her bow blown off by one of the torpedoes from the Johnston. She shears out of line, crippled, and a second cruiser, the Suzuya, pulls out as well to stand alongside. And so right off the bat, at the battle's outset, owing to Captain Evans' audacity in attacking alone, 2 of the 6 Japanese heavy cruisers are out of the fight in the first 10 minutes.
But the Johnston's triumph comes at a price. She is now within 7 miles of the battleship Congo, easy striking distance. At 7:30 a.m., Congo fires 3 14-inch projectiles. The 1,500-pound shells screech through the air at 2,600 feet per second. The heavy armor-piercing rounds slice right through Johnston's deck and engine room. Her speed is cut in half. She is making just 17 knots. Easy prey. Seconds later, 3 6-inch shells, possibly from Yamato, smash the bridge.
It just felt like the ship was picked up and shaken. Our mast main is snapped in two. I'm standing with my head out of the direct, and I see this mast coming down. Complete chaos.
The Japanese shells paralyze Johnston's electrically powered aft 5-inch gun turrets.
My gun was under the control of the gun director. But when that hit occurred, everything went blank. My sound-powered earphones went blank. We lost all electric power to the gun. We were completely out of commission.
The decks are slippery with blood. Captain Evans suffers serious wounds, but will not relinquish control of the ship.
Captain Evans is forced to abandon the bridge and to move to the aft steering station. Nobody is left on the bridge. It's filled with gore. It's just a scene of unimaginable carnage.
Incredibly, Johnston's damage control teams restore power to 2 of her 5-inch gun turrets. Commander Evans is determined to keep fighting. Johnston continues firing. The other ships prepare to engage with torpedo runs, while pilots from Taffy 3's air wing bravely throw their lightly armed aircraft against the massive floating fortresses of the center force. The battle that began as a mismatch is now an all-out brawl. October 25th, 1944. American pilots from Taffy 3's small carriers take flight in a desperate attempt to stop the Japanese center force from annihilating their ships. These fighters and dive bombers are armed for ground attack and anti-submarine duty. Their weapons are virtually useless against the giant Japanese ships.
Many of them armed with nothing other than depth charges or machine gun bullets, in some cases almost nothing at all. And their job is to bear down that center force and do something, anything, to prevent their carriers from being run down like dogs on a highway and slaughtered by these massive ships.
Lieutenant Richard Roby flies with a division of FM-2 Wildcat fighters from the escort carrier Gambier Bay. The 24-year-old pilot maneuvers his fighter through a maelstrom of flak.
You don't get scared. You get scared afterward, not during.
Roby noses over from 1,200 feet, strafing Japanese destroyers with his 50 caliber machine guns.
I aimed at the torpedoes, which are midships, because if I put the torpedoes out of existence, that put them basically out of existence.
Soon, sister escort carrier groups Taffy 1 and 2, located 30 miles to the south, scramble their Wildcats and Avengers to assist. By 7:15 a.m., hundreds of Allied aircraft fill the sky. Their courageous efforts succeed in forcing the Japanese ships into defensive maneuvers. This break in the attack allows the destroyers Hull and Heermann to launch torpedo strikes. Heermann's torpedoes miss their intended target, but streak toward Yamato. The Japanese flagship turns hard to avoid the incoming threat. From the cockpit of his FM-2 Wildcat, Richard Roby spots the retreating Japanese flagship and moves in with his 50 calibers.
I started shooting at the anti-aircraft positions on the foredeck because they're unprotected. They're just out in the open. But then eventually I got to the point I couldn't bear on them because I was too low. That's when I shot at the bridge. I stopped firing because I ran out of ammunition.
Surprisingly, after the air and torpedo assault, Yamato does not rejoin the fight. But Kurita's center force still wields plenty of deadly firepower. At 7:35 a.m., the tiny American destroyer escort Samuel B. Roberts enters the fray. She heads out on a torpedo run towards the heavy cruiser Chokai. Samuel B. Roberts is a destroyer escort, or DE. She's smaller than destroyers like Johnston, designed to scout for submarines. She's armed with 2 5-inch guns and 3 Mark 15 torpedoes. Chokai is over twice as long, 10 times as heavy, with over 15 times the armament of the Roberts.
Here is a destroyer escort doing something she was never built to do. Here are her men doing things they were never trained to do, but they did it.
As she steams ahead, the Roberts crew spots the mangled destroyer Johnston limping back from her strike. For 18-year-old Seaman First Class Jack Usen, the sight of Captain Evans on the Johnston's deck steels his resolve.
There was Captain Evans on the back. He's giving orders. And we all said, look, that's Captain Evans on there, my God. And as he comes by us, he was saluting. He went like this, just like this, and gave a quick salute to our captain.
Under cover of smoke, Roberts advances to within 2.5 miles of Chokai.
We could see his 2 front 8-inch gun turrets turning toward us. And I swear to God, it looks like he was coming right between my eyes.
Chokai fires 8-inch projectiles, each weighing nearly 300 pounds. But Roberts has moved so close, the Japanese cruiser can't train her guns low enough. The shells fly overhead. Roberts sends 3 24-foot-long Mark 15 torpedoes, knifing through the water at Chokai. They score a direct hit on the heavy cruiser.
We didn't know any better, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds. We were cheering like it was a baseball game.
Then, Roberts lashes out with her only remaining weapons.
We started now dueling with them with our 2 5-inch gun. That's all we had left. A 5-inch shell would bounce right off their hull. So our 2 gunners were aiming at the upper works.
For 60 incredible minutes, Roberts slugs it out against adversaries 10 to 30 times her size. She fires more than 600 rounds of 5-inch ammo. But at 8:51 a.m., Roberts shudders under the first of several devastating hits.
We took a salvo of 6 8-inch shells on the gun that's like mine up front, only in the back, 40 millimeter in the back. When the smoke cleared, we found out through our gun captain that 42 gun is gone, disintegrated, gone. We knew all our shipmates. I knew two boys pretty close in that gun back there. And all I could do was think of those guys, they're gone. And that's when we knew that this is it. This is a fight to the finish.
In a furious last stand, the Roberts aft 5-inch gun, the only one left, sets the cruiser Chikuma's bridge afire and knocks out her number 3 gun turret. Moments later, 3 14-inch projectiles from the battleship Congo impact the Roberts. A 40-foot hole is ripped open on her port side near the waterline.
We could drive a semi-truck through there. And we'd taken on water, tons of water were going in. Somebody yelled down, "Abandon ship! Abandon ship! Every man for himself!"
At 9:35 a.m., Usen and his shipmates abandon ship and pray for rescue. 30 minutes later, Samuel B. Roberts, the courageous ship known in Navy lore as the destroyer escort that fought like a battleship, slips beneath the waves. 89 sailors go down with the ship. The tin cans of Tappy 3 are succumbing to the withering firepower of the Japanese Armada. October 25th, 1944, 9 a.m. The battle to protect MacArthur's invasion force has been raging for over 2 hours. Despite the Americans' heroic torpedo attacks, the Japanese force inflicts serious damage on 3 of Tappy 3's small escort carriers. Now, the light cruiser Yahagi leads 4 destroyers on a torpedo run against the crippled flat tops. The only American ship in position to stop them is the battered USS Johnston. The Johnston opens fire with her few remaining 5-inch guns.
Anytime we could get keyed in on something, we fired. And we kept firing as long as we could possibly could.
Captain Evans orders Johnston to proceed full steam ahead, attempting to cross the T on the Japanese column. Crossing the T is a classic naval tactic, where a ship crosses in front of an enemy so she can fire all her guns, while the enemy can only fire its forward armament. But before Johnston can fully cross the T, Yahagi unexpectedly turns sharply to starboard. The destroyers follow.
All of a sudden, they start turning one after another. Well, we had an idea then that something was up, and it was probably a torpedo attack. But their position was so bad that there was an element of doubt.
The Japanese fire their torpedoes. The Japanese Type 93 Long Lance is one of the most successful torpedoes of the war. With a maximum range of 20 miles and 1,000-pound explosive charge, it could sink a warship with a well-placed hit. As with all torpedoes, speed, range, and running depth must be preset. But the Johnston has caused the Japanese to fire prematurely, before making proper adjustments. The torpedoes miss their mark. Again, Johnston has saved the carriers, and again, she pays the price. The 5 Japanese ships bear down on the lone destroyer. Johnston staggers fire among her attackers in a desperate but futile attempt to stave off the inevitable. At 9:10 a.m., a deadly fusillade rakes the ship.
That really turning point was the gun 52 was hit, which was right and direct to the bridge. Well, it killed practically everyone in there, set 5-inch ammunition cases on fire, clouds of smoke.
Finally, Johnston's damaged engines falter and quit. She's dead in the water. Enemy destroyers encircle the crippled ship, firing relentlessly.
The ship was just taking so many hits that they couldn't patch the holes fast enough, and just impossible to keep her afloat.
At 9:45 a.m., 2 hours and 45 minutes into the battle, Captain Evans gives the order to abandon ship. 25 minutes later, the Johnston sinks beneath the waves. 186 of her crew are lost. But incredibly, Johnston and Taffy 3 have achieved the impossible. Admiral Kurita has signaled the 20 undamaged ships in the center force. Return home. Thanks to the determination and courage of the American sailors and airmen, MacArthur's invasion force at Leyte is saved. The battle is over. David has felled Goliath.
Admiral Sprague said that the simplest theory for Admiral Kurita's decision to turn around is he was simply taking too much damage to continue. And I think he's probably also starting to wonder if the show plan itself is still viable. His decision is somewhat mysterious, but I think in the context of all these factors, it's understandable.
Taffy 3's success at turning back the center force comes with enormous sacrifice. 2 destroyers, 2 carriers, and 1 destroyer escort are sunk. Nearly 1,000 survivors of these lost ships, including Jack Hewson, Bob Hagen, and Bob Hollenbaugh, endure 70 hours in shark-infested waters before being rescued. More than 1,000 sailors and naval airmen are killed. For its heroic service, Taffy 3 receives a Presidential Unit Citation for extraordinary bravery in action. Captain Ernest Evans of the Johnston abandons ship with his crew, but is never seen again. He is posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor. For the mighty Yamato, there would be no honors. The most powerful battleship in history proved to be the most conspicuous non-factor in the fight.
This was really the only opportunity for the Yamato to get to do what she was built to do, which was to use these massive world-beating naval rifles to win a decisive battle against an American fleet. And so in turning away, Kurita, in a sense, betrayed the very essence of the Yamato's spirit.
After the battle off Samar, the Yamato returns to Japan. 6 months later, in April 1945, she embarks on a desperate kamikaze mission to save the Japanese Empire. April 6, 1945, the Imperial Navy launches a final desperate mission in the Pacific, Operation Tengo, meaning Heaven Number 1.
The Tengo plan is the naval incarnation of the kamikaze. This was a one-way suicide mission led by Yamato to speed down from the home islands and attack the American anchorage at Okinawa. If they lose Okinawa, the U.S. will have the staging base it needs to attack the southern home islands. And so this is really a crucial moment.
Yamato and her screen of 9 cruisers and destroyers are spotted by U.S. submarines south of Kyushu Island. On the next morning, April 7th, more than 300 aircraft launch from American carriers and speed toward violent confrontation with the Tengo force. Lieutenant Francis Ferry, piloting a Helldiver from the carrier Bennington, flies in the first wave. Just 1 month earlier, Ferry's plane was almost blown from the sky by Yamato's murderous flak barrage.
We knew what we were getting into, and there was a lot of tense feelings. The Yamato hit me once. I had that feeling of, I'm going to get you.
Ferry is at the controls of a Curtiss SB-2C, the legendary Helldiver. Son of a bitch second class, as it was known, had a higher top speed and more than twice the bomb load of its predecessor, the SBD Dauntless. Each of the pilots in Ferry's division carries an arsenal of 8 5-inch rockets and 2 1,000-pound armor-piercing bombs. Yamato looms below.
When the American planes first show up, they're greeted by what one pilot describes as looking down the cone of a volcano, namely the 18-inch main battery of Yamato, trained as high as they can go. So it was absolutely harrowing for these pilots to be confronted with this.
At 12:20 p.m., Ferry pushes over from 3,000 feet, using his guns to draw a bead on the target.
I use my 20mm cannons to help me aim because I had tracers. And if the tracers were flying straight, then I knew I was flying straight. I could see my tracers going into the Yamato, and I'd drop both the 8 rockets and the 1,000-pound bombs at the same time.
Ferry's bombs strike aft of the battleship's superstructure. The other Helldivers drive home their attack.
On the forward hit, I could see smoke and that type of thing. On the aft hit, I could see fire.
Several planes fall victim to the deadly curtain of flak. But their attack takes out most of Yamato's anti-aircraft guns. The path is clear for 2 more waves of bombers. Her gun directors are knocked out of action. Then TBM Avengers bore in at wavetop level, dropping Mark 13 torpedoes. These aerial torpedoes dive to a preset depth and detonate on impact. The torpedo's 600-pound warheads rip open watertight compartments on her port side.
The port side is flooding with water and the ship takes on a list. It's very difficult to aim your guns on a ship that's listing.
The Japanese attempt counterflooding on the starboard side. But these desperate moves only buy the Yamato another half hour of life. Just after 2 p.m., the effects of at least 15 bomb and torpedo hits have reduced the mightiest battleship ever built to a sinking hulk.
There are 2 feelings. One, you've done something, you're satisfied, you get that feeling. But you also get a sad feeling, bombing a vessel full of young kids. And that's the thing that has bothered me over the years. Every April 7th, I go through that.
At approximately 2:30 p.m., Yamato goes down with about 2,500 officers and men. Only some 270 survivors are pulled from the sea. But the pride of the Japanese Navy will not go quietly to her watery grave. Before slipping beneath the surface, her powder magazine detonates. On April 7, 1945, carrier-launched airstrikes sink not only Yamato, but also the cruiser Yahagi and 4 destroyers in the ill-fated Tengo mission. Of more than 300 U.S. aircraft involved in the attack, 10 planes and 12 airmen are lost. In June 1945, after 2 months of savage combat, the Allies secure Okinawa. In the aftermath of the failed Tengo mission, the remnants of the Japanese fleet would never again sortie out to meet the enemy. Yamato was designed as the embodiment of imperial power and glory. Ironically, in its death throes, it became the funeral pyre of the Japanese Navy.
The Pentagon has bet the farm on an airplane championed as a super fighter that can do everything for everybody. The F-35 is intended to replace and improve upon several current and aging aircraft types with widely different missions. To achieve this, the airplane must meet the mission requirements of the U.S. Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps, all in one basic airplane. The F-35 is marketed as a cost-effective, powerful, multi-role fighter airplane, significantly better than anything potential adversaries could build in the next 2 decades. But it's turned out to be none of those things. Officially begun in 2001, with roots extending back to the late 1980s, the F-35 program is nearly a decade behind schedule, and has failed to meet many of its original design requirements. It's also become the most expensive defense program in world history, estimated to cost around $1.5 trillion before the fighter is phased out in 2070. The unit cost per airplane, well above $100 million, is twice what was promised early on. And yet the Pentagon is still throwing huge sums of money at the project. Essentially, it has declared the F-35 too big to fail. As a retired member of the U.S. Air Force and currently a university professor of finance, who has been involved in and studied fighter aircraft operations and sustainment, along with system developments and acquisitions, I consider the F-35 to be one of the greatest boondoggles in military purchasing history. Part of the enormous cost of the F-35 program is the result of an effort to share a single basic aircraft design across different branches of the military. This concept was supposed to be a way of reducing development and sustainment costs, but it has accomplished the exact opposite. Lockheed Martin, the company building the F-35, said the plane would be far better than current aircraft, 4 times more effective in air-to-air combat, 8 times more effective in air-to-ground combat, and 3 times more effective in recognizing and suppressing an enemy's air defenses. It would, in fact, be second only to the F-22 in air superiority. In addition, the F-35 was to have better range and require less logistics support than current military aircraft. The Pentagon is still calling the F-35 the most affordable, lethal, supportable, and survivable aircraft ever to be used. But that's not how the airplane has turned out. In January 2015, mock combat testing pitting the F-35 against an F-16, one of the fighters it is slated to replace, resulted in the F-35's test pilot noting that the F-35 was less maneuverable and markedly inferior to the F-16 in a visual range dogfight. One reason the F-35 doesn't possess the world-beating air-to-air prowess promised, and is likely not even adequate when compared with its current potential adversaries, is that it was designed foremost to be stealthy to enemy radar. This requirement has taken precedence over maneuverability and undermined its overall air-to-air lethality. The Pentagon and especially the Air Force seem to be relying almost exclusively on the F-35's radar stealth capabilities for it to succeed at its missions. However, in 1999 the same type of stealth technology was not able to prevent a U.S. Air Force F-117 flying over Kosovo from being located, tracked, and shot down using obsolete Soviet radar and surface-to-air missiles. In the nearly 2 decades since, that incident has been studied in depth by the Pentagon and by potential adversaries seeking weaknesses in passive radar stealth aircraft. Radar is not the only way to locate and target aircraft. An aircraft's infrared emissions, which are created by friction-generated heat as it flies through the air, along with its hot engines, can be used to target it. Several potential adversaries' fighters possess excellent infrared search and tracking systems to locate and target opposing aircraft. It's also very common in air-to-air battles for opposing planes to come close enough that their pilots can see each other. The F-35 is as visible as any other aircraft its size. Lockheed Martin and the Pentagon say the F-35's superiority over its rivals lies in its ability to remain undetected, giving it first look, first shot, first kill capabilities. Hugh Harkins, a highly respected author on military combat aircraft, called that claim a marketing and publicity gimmick in his book on Russia's Sukhoi Su-35S, a potential opponent of the F-35. He also wrote, in real terms an aircraft in the class of the F-35 cannot compete with the Su-35S for out-and-out performance such as speed, climb, altitude, and maneuverability. Other critics have been even harsher. Pierre Spree, a co-founding member of the so-called fighter mafia at the Pentagon and a co-designer of the F-16, calls the F-35 inherently a terrible airplane that is the product of an exceptionally dumb piece of Air Force PR spin. He has suggested the F-35 would likely lose a close-in-combat encounter to a well-flown MiG-21, a 1950s Soviet fighter design. Robert Dorr, an Air Force veteran, career diplomat, and military air combat historian, wrote in his book Air Power Abandoned, the F-35 demonstrates repeatedly that it can't live up to promises made for it. It's that bad. How did the F-35 go from its conception as the most technologically advanced, do-it-all military aircraft in the world to a virtual turkey? The F-35 program is the result of combining several separate and diverse projects into a set of requirements for an airplane that is trying to be everything to everyone. With the F-35, it appears designers created an elegant jack of all trades but master of none at great expense, both in the past and, apparently, well into the future. Thank you. Don't forget to subscribe this channel.